All right, we are back. I hope you guys are having an awesome day. I am having an awesome day myself. Today we have a bass player here in Kansas City, Jacob Roemer. How you doing?
Doing well. How you, Rob?
Pretty good, man. Thanks for coming and doing the show.
Of course.
Yeah. So if you guys have not seen it, we have already had Jacob on the show with his band Satori, and we came out and did a little
kind of a group band interview. It was cool.
Yeah. It turned out pretty good. We got to play a little. You got to hear you guys play a couple
that.
full songs, and then do some kind of mini interviews, and that turned out to be a pretty fun night.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Yeah. But so where you and I met was, I'm sure, at Brian Ruskin's gig, because I didn't know you were playing with Satori. I think it was probably at the Phoenix there. So I mean, just kind of starting there. Talk a little bit about getting to play with Brian, another guy who's done and then so Caleb Aldridge, he's been on the show already as well.
Yeah.
And then I know what's his face, Mark Montgomery has played bass with kind of opposite you. He's been on the show as well. So and Bree, Plaster. You probably don't know Bree, but she's another drummer who's played with Brian in the past too. That's also been on the show, but. Talk about Brian a little bit, playing with him.
Yeah, I've been playing with Brian pretty consistently for about 2 years now. And it's just one of my favorite groups I play in. He's kind of got his eclectic genres that he tries to bring in. He tries to do a lot of like jazz standards, but he does his own little arrangements and versions of them, and he does his original tunes, and he's a big R&B funk guy and blues guy and rock and roll, and he just kind of brings all that stuff together and tries to make it all work. And that's probably what I enjoy the most about playing with him is like the variety of each song. And it's kind of like I would call it, if I had to label it, I'd probably call it like a fusion jazz.
Confusion jazz, that's interesting. I've never heard of that term before. That's funny.
Yeah. No, but like fusion.
Fusion, confusion.
Yeah. No, it's a lot of fun. But yeah, it's, definitely like rock and roll sound, but like a jazz quartet.
Right.
And so, my role as a bass player is pretty much just trying to keep it down, but sometimes we get a little experimental and just kind of let it flow, and it's just a blast, all about communicating with each other in the live setting, and just listening.
Sure, yeah. I know I talked about this with Scotty McBee when he came onto the show, and we were talking about Dream Theater, and I don't know if you know Dream Theater that well, but those guys and Rush would be totally in this camp where they're sort of, in here they're rock, but in here they're jazz, and I think all of you guys sort of fit that type of idea where in your brains you just can't even stand it, right? You have to to just go into 11/8 and do some kind of heady stuff, but in your heart it's not. Like Brian, you can tell his heart is all over the place, like you said with the eclectic. Is that, that seems like right up your alley.
Yeah, me personally, that's what I love. Growing up, some of the biggest influence on me musically, was like Rush, Black Sabbath, Iron Maiden, Metallica. It was definitely like a heavy rock,
right,
based, group of artists I'd listen to.
Sure.
And then learning to play the bass and studying. The more I got into that, like the more in depth I got with different genres, and then Jaco Pastorius was somebody I discovered.
Sure.
That just kind of changed my world. I was like, wow, I didn't even know the bass could do that. And so I kind of studied his music and listened to a lot of that, and just kind of branched off from there. And I just kind of fell in love with a whole different style of music, but still have that soft spot for the classic rock sound,
right?
The metal sound. I love that.
Yeah, sure. Do you and so I've thought about this a lot because I'm I'm similar to you guys where I have a lot of different loves and a lot of different genres. But when you're playing in his band, do you come at each song differently then? Like I know I've played with him one of his originals that's like straight up bluegrass almost, you know, it's a real boom chuck fast kind of. Do you take a different mentality into each song, or do you kind of as a band just kind of come at it kind of the same and you're just playing another song?
Well, I can't speak for everybody else, but for me, it's the mentality I have. It's like, this is the Brian Ruskin Quartet, and it's kind of like I'm trying to fit that sound.
Yeah.
And
not necessarily bluegrass.
Yeah, not necessarily bluegrass
yeah,
sound. You know, and when you play with Brian, you play a lot of different genres. You know, it's like, and you can try to, you know, well, we're playing a blues tune right now, so I'm going to try to play the straight ahead, like classic blues bass line. You can do that.
Right.
But I tend to like try to follow like the Brian mentality. Like I've talked with Brian several times about this, and I was like, well, especially when I first joined the band, I was like, so like, what is it you're wanting from me? What am I doing this all right? Does it sound good? And basically the conversation we had was like, Brian's just like likes to have everybody be a collaborative effort, like put their own voice in there.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's why he hires us to play. You know, he wants our voice.
Yeah.
He wants to play his voice, and he wants to have you have your own voice. And ideally, it's gonna, you know, create some beautiful music or something cool at least. Ideally. And I think for the most part, especially after playing with them for a while, we're starting to like really mesh and kind of understand how we play.
Sure, yeah. And that's probably neat because, I mean, now that some of us are getting, you know, a little bit older and we've played in a couple of bands now, you know, as 30-year-olds or whatever, but like, I think it's funny when you're with a band for a while and you do get some different members, because you and Mark are pretty different. I don't know if you played with Mark ever, but he's much more blues, or you know, and not that you aren't, but he's very blues oriented, you know, and you're just something different from him. And I bet that's really neat for Brian at being so improv oriented that now he gets a different thing, and that's exciting.
Yeah, it's very exciting. You know, like I go out, sometimes I'll have another gig booked and I can't go play with him when Brian's got a gig, and so I'll have other people come sit in, and if I can catch the last part of the set, I always like to come out and check it out, because it's like, it's a different incarnation of the band, it's a different sound, and it's always cool.
Oh yeah.
You know, it's a lot of fun. Just, you know, talking about some of the songs we do, you know, like for example, a song we'll sometimes do is All Blues by Miles Davis. But we'll do that in so many different ways. You know, we'll play like a funk tune. Right. Sometimes we'll play it like a slow rock tune. You know, it's just, you know, we play it different ways, and like every time I hear it, and I love hearing other people's versions of that. You know, when like I'm not able to make the gig and somebody's sitting in, I love hearing what their interpretation of it is.
Sure.
And it what's fun is like when somebody is playing, okay, Brian calls a tune, everybody knows this song, but then somebody does something different that nobody's heard yet in the band, and then reading off that and feeding off that, and then creating a whole new, like something like we've never done before with this song.
Right.
That's what's exciting for me, and that's probably the most fun part about playing with Brian.
Yeah. And then, so that leads me into your other project with oh my gosh, Brandon Vogt.
Oh, Satori?
Yeah. And then, so Brandon's also been on the show. We've had an interview with him. That went good. And so him and Caleb kind of decided to do a thing, and now you're playing. So talk a little bit about what you guys are doing with Satori.
Yeah. Well, I kind of got into Satori. That's kind of Brandon Vogt's project. He started that, him and Caleb. And I met Caleb through Brian Ruskin, and I really enjoyed playing with Caleb and hanging out. And so he asked me if I'd come and jam with Satori, and I did, and really enjoyed it. And so what we're working on right now, we just put out our second album. It's been a couple months now. And right now we're working on the idea of writing a concept album. We've talked about it.
That's fun.
I think we want to do it. So we're just trying to come up with some ideas of what we want to make the whole thing about. Yeah, but that group is kind of similar to the Brian Ruskin Quartet. But it's all original music. We'll do a few covers here and there at live shows, but for the most part, we're trying to put out mostly original stuff. And yeah, it's been a real exciting process to write with those guys. Caleb, he's very, very good songwriter, and Brandon, he's a good songwriter as well, but he's just I'd say Brandon's a little more rhythmic when it comes to his writing style.
That's interesting, yeah.
He writes a lot of like licks that are, based off of patterns.
Sure.
And it's pretty interesting what things he comes up with. And then Caleb, he writes in the weirdest time signatures, but he makes it sound like if you weren't trying to count it out, you wouldn't even realize it's an odd time signature. He does a lot of 9/8, and sometimes it'll be like, I don't know, 5. He does 5 a lot, or 7. Writes in 7 a lot.
I like that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
and I can tell you guys do too.
Yeah, we love it.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun. But yeah, it's just the way I think Caleb does a really nice job with it, because like if you weren't really listening for it to be 7, you wouldn't know.
Yeah.
Like your average listener, not like your experienced musician. Like if you just got an average listener listening to it, like, oh yeah, this is good, this is cool. They're not like, oh, it feels weird, because that's usually the response with odd time signatures for people who aren't real into music or quite understand all that. When it's not in 4/4, they're like, oh, it feels weird. It's usually
I think Take 5 and then Money are probably 2 good examples of ones that don't feel weird.
Exactly.
They feel really normal when you hear those. But yeah, and that's really interesting. Your band is kind of fascinating to me, because what I was trying to run back when I started into town is kind of a prog rock, bring a lot of stuff, just like Brian, just like you guys. Mine was much more like pop driven. I had a lot more covers, rock covers, but it's writing kinds of stuff like that. And I always found it funny, the people that are purposefully trying to find the odd meters and find the really interesting artistic kind of stuff, and then the people that if you nudge them, they would go there, but they choose not to. Like, that whole thing fascinates me, of why musicians choose the Mustang Sally bands, and why, and why guys would choose to do a band like yours. Like, I mean, do you have any opinions about that? About like why you guys purposely want to do that, or willing to do that, or like?
Well, for me anyway, like I've played in those Mustang Sally bands, and it's fun. I don't have anything bad to say about that. Like I enjoy it. Usually those are like your more consistent paying gigs. If you can get in a band that's gigging a lot with those. But it does get boring, because what it becomes is like you got a set list and you play the set list, the same set list every show, every time. It's the same. And I don't know, for me, I like the freedom to express myself in a different way, like be able to, like with the Satori songs, like we don't always play in the exact same way every single time. Sometimes we'll like rehearse them a little differently and throw new ideas. Like the whole idea of that band is just, it's an open collaboration for art. We're just trying to express ourselves. And like I was talking about, Caleb's songwriting is a lot of the time he's not even trying to come up with odd time signatures. He just writes something and it just happens to be an odd time signature. And I think that's part of the reason why it sounds so smooth. Is because he's not trying to.
You're right.
And then there are times where we do like sit down and we're like, okay, here's the goal for this song. We're gonna try to do it in 5 or whatever.
Yeah.
But most of the time it's just like we write the song and then like we sitting back and counting it and like, oh, this is in 5 or whatever.
Yeah, what I think is funny too is when you do that, everybody's like, "Oh yeah, that," and then you guys who's your drummer? I keep forgetting his
Joel.
name. Joel, Joel, is a good example. Like, oh, that one, da da da, and he just plays it, because this is so, it's so natural for you guys to go into odd meters and stuff. Like you said, you guys probably don't even notice.
Yeah, a lot of times we don't.
We
we got to sit back and count it to figure it out, and it's usually when people ask us questions about it.
Right.
So then we go like, well, what are we doing?
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's pretty fun. And that's one thing that I was trying to get out of Brandon of why he thought to have, specifically you and Joel in there. And it sounds like that you guys were kind of friends and you guys were good, and so then we make a band, and that's as far as I think he maybe was thinking about it. And I was wondering with my band, I knew that I had agenda's a bad word, but I had like bullet points of things they needed to be able to do. They needed to be able to play in odd meters. They needed to be able to handle a 13 chord song.
Yeah.
They need to have a talent level up to, or they needed to be able to play in a lot of different genres and I wonder if in the back of his head he sort of knew that, but he wasn't really saying it out loud. Why he chose.
I'm sure he knew what he was looking for. But I think he was. I don't know how well you know Brandon, but he's just a very down to earth, chill, easygoing person. And I feel like he's the type of person that just kind of lets things go with the flow. And I was like, we'll try this out for a while.
Yeah.
And I think he's more about having a positive experience with things than like making the agenda a priority.
Right, yeah, sure.
And so there was another bass player in the band before I was, and they were kind of experiencing the lack of technical ability with him, and so when I met him, started hanging out with them, they asked if I'd be interested in just jamming. And that's what it started out, was just coming over and jamming. And then they had a talk with their other bass player and told him like we were kind of looking for somebody who's a little more or has a different skill level, and so then they asked if I'd be interested in doing it. And
that's cool. Yeah. So you and I a while ago were talking about the idea of like what people are thinking about while they're playing, or what should they be thinking about, like as a bass player, talking about like kind of the role in the band a little bit, talk to me what you, not just for Satori, you can talk about them if you want, but how are you coming at it, in regards to your role of...
Well, I think that's like the most important thing, or one of the most important things to think about when you're playing in a group is like, what is your role in this group? Like, are you like supposed to be the guy with a lot of chops and shred? Are you supposed to be just an accompaniment to the vocals? Are you supposed to be keeping time? What are you supposed to be doing in this band? What is your job?
That'd be Jocko, right? Your role is to just destroy
exactly.
everyone.
As a bass player,
right.
That was his band. That was his role. But that's not appropriate for every setting. It's like I play in this country band every now and then, and if I did that on those gigs, I wouldn't be hired anymore. They just want 1 in 5, just the whole time, and that's it's fine. Like I understand that going into that gig, like that's my job, that's what I'm doing. And so like with Satori, it's a little more free. It's more about. My job is, to keep time and keep the rhythms going and kind of keep all that locked down. But, it's also a little more open for more experimental ideas and stuff, and be a little more busy with my bass lines.
Right.
That's that role in that gig. I did musical theater for a while, and that role is just read the page. They have the sheet music for you, and they just want you playing that, And so it's kind of, it's an important thing as a musician, is like, what is your role in the band? Because like you can have all the chops in the world and nobody cares if you're not supposed to be doing it at that time.
Yeah.
You know, like it doesn't matter how good you are. That can like get you fired from gigs is not playing your role.
Sure. Yeah. I have said this before on the show about country. It's like and I always ask bass and drummers this because I think it's fascinating about the amount of filling. And you hear a lot of guys, like I had definitely this one friend of mine in college who was a drummer, and he just could not sit on his hands. I mean, he just always had to be doing shit, and so, but he didn't realize, it probably because he was just ADD and he just had to be doing, I don't know if he could have done country. Yeah. Like if his brain would have even let him do country,
Yeah, it's a different
just
kind
sit there,
kind of discipline. It's a different kind of discipline, The fills are super simple, and they're not every time around.
Right.
It's like maybe every 4 bars at the most, and then at that point, that's almost too much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's pretty much just keeping it down, keeping the feel, keeping the time.
Right.
As a bass player, keeping the changes,
Mm-hmm.
and usually it's 1-4-5, or they'll have other chords there every now and then, but for the most part, it's 1-4-5.
Sure.
For your standard country tunes.
My other guitar player that I play with, he goes, this time we're going to the minor. I laugh at him every time, I'm like, oh, the 6? Okay, alrighty. It's the 6 or the 2, the minor. I don't know. I always give him crap because he's not into jazz, and so, he's simple and I just think it's really funny, especially when I ran my band, about talking about the role of each player, and also like just even little stuff like range of the bass, when do I need to be way down and give it some real beef, and then like, for example, like uprights, on the solo, I mean, you stay down and it's muddy as crap, that's why they're all, up and thumb and position and crap, and I'm like, yeah, because we can't hear it, This weird stuff like that is always cracking me up about just telling guys, okay, do it, well, there's more to it than that, you're thinking out what range I need to be in, when do I need to play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And like, when it comes to like bass solos, for me anyway, like I've always, especially like in a jazz quartet setting, a lot of the times like the bass player is the last person to solo, and it's usually because someone was done, so they ran out of ideas, so they just stopped playing, and it's not all the time, but it happens a lot. And so then it's your turn to solo, and for me, I like to like just kind of keep walking the line or keep playing the bass line for a few bars, just let it settle down a little bit. And so sometimes
on your solo,
on my solo, sometimes 8 bars of my solo is just walking a bass line, and I'll walk up to the upper register to a point where I can feel free or feel comfortable to start playing some melodic ideas.
What do you think about slapping?
Slapping, like on upright or?
Well, electric specifically. Like, do you think people slap too much, or do you or like what?
As a bass player, I think it's awesome.
Right.
I wish I was better at it. But I don't, around town, I don't hear anybody slapping too much.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah.
Most of the time, when I see somebody doing it, they're doing it in an appropriate way. Like it's very tasteful.
Right.
But I have seen videos online of people just getting too crazy with it. But like that's like people like Victor Wooten. That guy's insane.
He's
like,
insane. Yeah.
Like he doesn't need a band. He just needs a bass and an amp.
My 4 Strings and Me.
Yeah,
I've ever heard that song. That's a killer tune.
That's all he needs.
House full of nothing.
Yeah, but like Victor Wooten's also like another really great example of playing the role, because like when he goes out on tour with Victor Wooten, he's playing the role of being the solo artist.
Right. Yeah.
But when he plays
goes
with
back
Bella,
with Bela,
he's doing a great job just keeping it simple sometimes. Like I've listened to a lot of Bela records. I'm a big Bela fan. all the records he's on, I mean, yeah, he gets some crazy solos, he has some crazy fills every now and then, but for the most part, it's pretty simple what he's doing. You know, he's just playing the role as the bass player.
Right. Well, I mean, their songs are nuts. So
Yeah,
I mean,
well,
you know,
well,
the role is
yeah.
still like ridiculously fun in that band.
Well,
you know?
when I say simple, I mean
Right,
like,
yeah.
relative to the.
I mean, he'll doom 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 boop a doo doo boom boop a doo doo
Yeah.
doo. I mean, it's notey as shit. You know? I mean,
yeah.
but he's still like, I totally know what you're saying though. He still knows where he's at.
Mm-hmm.
He knows he's on stage with a bunch of other ridiculous players. You know, so he doesn't have to take over. You know.
Yeah.
That's cool, man. So you mentioned a little bit about playing theater. Talk a little bit about.
Musical theater.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was kind of an interesting thing I fell into. I just got called to sub in for a guy, and it was actually one of the craziest, most stressful gigs of my life. I just show up. They've been running the show for 2 weeks, and I didn't get a chance to rehearse with anybody.
Wow.
I showed up 2 hours before the show because we were supposed to do a rehearsal, but nobody else showed up. Didn't get the music until 20 minutes before the show, so I'm sitting there with the music director making sure I got all the right notes and stuff.
Good luck. Here you go.
Yeah, and it's basically like, have fun. We'll see you at the end. And yeah, it was okay. I can't say it was a perfect show by any means.
Yeah.
But it was okay. And the next thing I know, the theater's calling me back to do the next show, and I was like, well, I might give this a second chance where I actually, learn the show before I try to play it.
Right. Yeah. Were you an orchestra?
Yeah, I was.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So you've read forever. Yeah, like bass clef or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. And well, that's the thing about theater that I haven't had a whole lot of experience with. There are all kinds of like little words and cues, that they write in there that or stuff that I wasn't familiar with. Like the whole like the vamps and cue lines and like other things you got to pay attention to.
Yeah.
Not just reading the music. And they've got their own kind of theater lingo, and so it's like learning new vocabulary to figure out. Okay, I see what this word is. It's button. I don't know what that means, and so it's like figuring stuff out like that.
Yeah.
And
that's probably the actors throwing a button at some, or some sort of cue, whatever's going on stage. There's this massive thing, but button. The hell is it? In the scene there's a and then there's your cue, and I think that's what's so funny about theater when you have all this stuff going on and they need the little triangle for Tinkerbell or something, whatever the hell's going on, and you have like percussion. I can't even imagine doing percussion.
I know. Reading one of those scores.
Right, yeah.
Crazy.
They're just, I mean, they've got Neil Peart Neil Peart, yeah, he's the drummer, right?
For Rush.
Yeah. So, they've got this, monstrosity of crap there. The percussionists, they've got their wood block and and then the timpani and the traps and like dealing with all that crap on stage that's just funny to me.
Yeah, no, it's actually, once I got a little more comfortable with the theater, that's pretty much who I'd be focusing on as the drummer and watching all those bells and whistles. And
did you find? I always found that. Because if you guys don't know, they give you this, ridiculous book of like 45 tunes, right? I mean, they're all short too, and and there's a little in between.
Transition.
Transitional music. So, like, did you have trouble with like flipping like?
Oh yeah.
3, 2, 4, 3, 2. Just each song and keys and like.
Yeah, the key. Well, that's the other thing that's crazy about it. It'll be like. A lot of musical theater, they'll have like a theme, like a theme 1,
right?
And that appears for 8 bars every 3 songs or something.
Yeah, that's funny.
But every time it's in a different key.
Right. Yeah. And thanks.
So, and so it's like, and then the page turns are brutal, and so it's like that was just a whole different animal learning how to.
Right.
Learn how to do that and read that and read ahead and be prepared for all that. And it was a lot of fun, and I'd definitely do some more theater gigs. But I just needed a break from it for a while.
Yeah.
It was just getting to the point where it's a lot of work doing all the rehearsals, it's a big time commitment, and it kind of prevents you from booking other shows and other gigs and things.
That's a big problem, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a huge time commitment. It's nice because it's a solid paycheck, for however long you're running the show, but then you miss out on a lot of other opportunities.
Right. Yeah, so that's a good transition. So we talked about this a little bit on the Satori interview, where it's always the challenge to know where to make our money, as musicians out here. And I found that a lot of people tend to find their day job, whatever the hell that is, and then now that they don't have to, worry about money so bad, now they can come join a really interesting artistic group and not have to go be in the Mustang Sally bands, and they don't have to, sell out and be the performing monkey and all that crap, but what's your feeling on that?
Well, me personally, I was doing just music for a little over a year when I decided I needed to get something else going. Because I was a performing monkey. I was taking every single gig that got thrown at me, and a lot of them I just wasn't into. They weren't my thing,
right.
And it was like I was doing it purely for the money, and at that point I was like, the money wasn't that great either, and so I thought about teaching, and I thought about doing whatever, and I've stumbled across a really nice part-time construction job, and the thing I like about that is everybody on the crew is a musician. And
that's weird.
Yeah,
that's funny.
And it's great because they understand like what it means to have a gig, and like, oh, I need to take off early, or I can't work this day here. They're very, very flexible, and I mean it's like the perfect part-time gig for me. And
sounds like they're understanding.
Yeah, they're very understanding, which is like not always easy to find, as a musician. Like I think that's the hardest part. It doesn't really matter what you do if you're going to get a day job. The one thing that's important is that they understand and that they're flexible.
Sure, because you were just talking about the time commitment of the theater gig, and how that just screws over nights for a month. Yeah. 2 months or something, right? And so that's kind of the key. I mean, would you say that that's kind of the key is you've got to find like day, right, for your day, for the actual day job. You can't find a waitress.
Yeah, you wouldn't be able to like bartend or waiter job would be kind of hard.
Right.
So like, and especially like nobody wants to wait tables, Monday at 3 p.m. Nobody goes out to eat on Monday at 3 p.m. So you're not going to be making a whole lot of money doing that anyway.
Right. But that seems that seems like an obvious thing, find a different time to do your job, but it really is a problem. I've noticed that myself, is that if I've got these 3 or 4 projects, teaching and playing, and if I go get a day job, it screws all of them up. Because I can't go do Best Buy, because I'm like, I can only work mornings, and they're like, okay, we hear you, and then all of a sudden they start, scheduling you whenever they feel like.
Yeah, I understand that. I mean, I've dealt with that before too, and I just got out of that. And so I feel pretty fortunate right now with how flexible everybody is and understanding everybody is on the crew. And it's and I actually really enjoy what I do. It's it's a different kind of gratification. With music, it's very slow, can be a painful process, but it takes time to see the results with music. Whereas like in this construction job, in a week I can look back and say I did that.
Right. Yeah.
It feels kind of good.
Sure. Yeah. What would you say about the idea of doing something different from music too. Do you think that's important for some people in their day job?
I think it is for me anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because it kind of makes me excited about playing music. You know, it's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I just got off work and now I can't wait to play my bass. Can't wait to practice. Can't wait to go do this rehearsal. You know, and when I was doing music all the time, you know, like playing gigs I wasn't interested in. I was just like, when I had time to practice, I didn't want to. I was just like, I wouldn't say I was sick of playing, but I was just like, I was tired of playing at the time. You know, I was just like, I don't really feel like practicing right now.
Right.
That was just me. And, you know, if you're the kind of person that, you know, can finish, you know, teaching all day and then want to go practice some more, then awesome.
Yeah, sure. But
For me, I just didn't seem to work too well.
right. Drowning in G flats all day.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
just your mind, and you know. Yeah, that's probably nice. I've been working with a buddy doing some handyman kind of, you know, similar thing, and it's been really nice for me too.
Yeah.
You know, that just getting your
change of pace,
mind,
yeah.
like
Different change of pace for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned, I think we didn't even get into kind of how you started, but how was orchestra for you? Did you like orchestra, or how was all of that early on?
I liked my orchestra teacher. I had a really great orchestra teacher growing up, and yeah, I did like orchestra. It was probably one of my favorite classes in high school and middle school, but I just never enjoyed the music. You know, as a young teenager, you know, Handel and Bach and all that. It's like now it blows my mind.
Right.
But then it was just it was boring.
Sure.
You know.
Yeah. Well, it is.
Yeah.
Sometimes. Sometimes it's the opposite of boring. It's the most mind, stimulating thing you can do, at least playing it.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah,
it's
for
like,
sure.
I can't even keep up with this crap. It's so, difficult, you know, it's like...
Yeah. Well, and so, orchestra was just... the music to me was boring, but in college I volunteered for the orchestra there, and I sat in, and I really enjoyed that.
Right.
But we were playing some more difficult repertoire, and that was fun. But I had spent a lot of my time in the jazz program.
Okay.
And so,
Yeah. At college, you know.
Mm-hmm. And orchestra was, it was a good experience for me for sure.
Sure.
It's kind of where I learned how to read music, how to all these technical things. Something I've found is the orchestral bass players, they tend to play more in tune than just somebody that's just studied jazz.
Sure.
And so I feel like it's helped with my intonation and just all kinds of technical things. So yeah, it was a very good experience. But yeah, the music for me was just, I don't know.
Yeah.
As a 13-year-old.
Oh yeah.
Bach wasn't cool.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think it's always funny. The fourth graders, they come in and they play, and it's they're playing open strings and it's boring and stuff. And then as soon as they get that da 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 da, album park up, they're like, oh, that song's funny, And then afterwards they're all like, again, But you gotta have one of those, every 2 months to kind of grab them back in again, because they're getting bored. But did you? So obviously that was an easy transition over to the over to the theater stuff. Then I mean, it's very similar,
very
right?
Similar, and very very similar. So something that I tend to struggle with is I also play electric bass, and sight reading music on electric bass is a little different because a lot of times it'll give you a tablature or something else, and the positions can be different than on upright. And, for whatever reason, I just don't. Or at least in school, I didn't have to sight read for the electric. Every time I got sheet music, it was for the upright.
Right.
And so doing a couple of these musical theater gigs, you know, playing electric and sight reading the music, like, you know, I did Cats, that was all electric. I did Tommy, all electric bass, you know, music from The Who. That's actually a really cool musical.
Oh, yeah.
And it was interesting seeing all these Who songs, you know, and their arrangement, like actually seeing it written out.
Oh, yeah, but that's nuts. Yeah.
It was cool. Yeah.
That's always weird, looking at songs that you've never played written out.
Yeah, for sure, yeah.
And you look at it and it's so square.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you know, attitude-wise, and you know, like all of those piano versions. You know, when they give you a piano book of Aladdin or some, you know, some random series of Beatles, right? The Beatles piano book. Just like, oh my gosh, it's terrible. It's like, and then you listen to Paul McCartney do it, and it's like, okay, there you go.
Yeah, well, it's so hard to like notate the rhythms, especially like in pop music. It's kind of like a slang rhythm, you know.
Right.
It's like, they're not exact subdivisions.
Right.
And so it's kind of. I mean, that's like, I guess that's like a dialect, you know, and it's like music's a language is like learning how to, you know, speak the dialect and speak the accent. You know?
The one that it's hard for me when I try to get classical players to play is when they write swing out in triplets.
Oh yeah.
You know, that one is an example of that. You know, like you're just like, well, yeah, it's technically a triplet, but not really.
Quite.
You
like
know?
the math's not exact.
Yeah.
You know, it's.
That's funny. What was hard for you starting out? Was there anything that was kind of tricky, or even lately, or whatever? I mean, is there any?
Well, something like I always struggled with was reading music. That took me forever to like get good at.
Yeah.
You know, and it wasn't so much like reading the notes. Like that all made sense to me. The thing that I struggled with was the rhythms. Like, I just don't think. It was explained well enough to me, or maybe I just wasn't paying attention. Who knows? I just know that was when I was younger. That was something I really struggled with, was reading rhythms. And as far as like strengths, I always like had a good ear. Like that's kind of what I relied on instead of reading the rhythms. Like, well, I know how it's supposed to sound, so
you just listen the first 4 rehearsals, right? You're sight reading.
Yeah.
I was the same way. Yeah, that's funny. Ron White has this joke about this tire guy and his tire falls off, and he's like, the guy missed lug nut day, you know, this tire guy, and they like, it was like all these kids that are missing quarter note day, you know. You're talking about not getting trained good enough, you know.
Who knows, it might have been something where I was gone or something, but it was just,
But some rhythms are written out really weird.
They are, yeah.
And then you play it, you know, D dot dot da 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 da, and you're like, oh, that.
Yeah.
Right, I'm sure. Is that what happened to you basically every time?
All the time, you know. And you know, my orchestra teacher, she would always make up funny sayings, you know, like for the rhythm, like watermelon or pepperoni pizza, or whatever, you know. And that I was more into that than actually reading the notes on the page.
That's funny, man. Yeah. I think a lot of, especially in the non-classical world, because classical people, that's all they do is read. I mean, they're really good at it. I mean, they're 10 times better readers than I am. But I think in all of, you know, the American genres anyway, the blues guys, country, rock, jazz guys can get okay at reading in general, but all that blues, rock, country, bluegrass area folk, they've always talked about reading being a problem, like a major problem, you know, and they'll sit there and, you know, hack out something the third shot. You play it through them 3 times, and they're like, okay. And then they and I've heard a lot of people talk about that, where do you think that would be a better idea, because this is the Suzuki method to start everybody out here, well, you know, what do you think about that?
That's how I was taught. Like my first experiences with music were sitting down at Boy Scout campfire, listening to guys play guitar, and then trying to figure out what they were doing.
Right.
And it was basically like blues and folk songs that they'd be playing. And then, for whatever reason, I thought the upright bass was pretty sweet, and I wanted to play that.
Well, it is pretty sweet.
I was like, I want to play that one, the big one over there.
Yeah.
And my first bass instructor, that's how he taught, was the Suzuki Method.
Right.
And for me, I thought it worked really well. Like, I was getting to the point where I was doing a lot more technically advanced things without really understanding what I was doing necessarily. Like, I didn't understand, I'm playing 16th notes here, or I'm playing 8th notes here, or these are weird subdivisions here. I'm playing syncopations.
Right.
Like, I didn't understand like what it was I was doing, but I was still doing it. And so when I actually sat down to actually learn how to read, I was like, okay, I need to know how to do this. I need to be better at this.
Right.
It just made more sense, I think, because like it's so hard, because like music's not on a piece of paper. It's not the paper, it's not the ink.
Yep.
It's what you're hearing, and so like it's so hard to like start, especially with a kid, and it's hard to get a kid to sit still, let alone look at a sheet of paper and be like, this is music. And then it's hard to explain that. It's a weird idea, a weird concept.
This is a piece of paper.
Yeah.
Remember that.
Yeah.
And that's it's very abstract, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's interesting. And on a little bit different note, I haven't really ever asked somebody this, but so for us, a lot of my students, because it sounds like you've bowed a lot on bass, with not just plucking like the jazz guys do, and like I've always found that I think it's hilarious how it seemed like Wichita kids love to play at the Frog, and they always sit there, and they were again, I'm stereotyping, but typically aggressive. The kids up here, they pull way out. They're 2/3 out in the bow, and that's really comfortable for them. Even the fiddle players that I've seen, because if I were to play fiddle music, I'd stay right in the middle, because you have that fulcrum, and it's like, you can just go as fast as you want, but they want to come out another 2-3 inches from 2/3 out, whatever. With bass, is it hard to get a really good sound like out upper half? Do you really have to stay down by your hand, or
to answer your question, yes, it's more difficult to get a louder sound on the second half of your bow. But it's just like speed, weight, placement. Like that's all about finding that balance, and when you can get comfortable and understand where that is, where you can get the big sound out of that. It's like when you're doing a down bow, and you're doing like a whole note or something to keep that same sound consistent. The first half of your bow is going to be moving a little bit slower than the second half. Because you got to speed that second half up because you're losing a lot of that weight. But then you also have to be able to put more weight into the bow, learn how to I play a French bow. I've never really
I always forget French is this, and German is the other.
And I haven't experimented too much with the German bow.
German seems weird to me.
It's weird. I've seen some monster players use them, but I've never experimented with that. But as far as the French bow goes, it's kind of like the same thing. You got that fulcrum. But it's better to use the weight of your arm and try to press down. And that's kind of how you get a forced sound. Not a. You
mean it's better to use weight instead of press?
Yeah.
I agree.
You're using the weight of your arm to do that.
Instead, because what we want to do,
what you want to do is get tense and just use your arm as kind of a lever
right there on that. And then you're squeezing.
It's all about relax.
Right. See, I think bass would be hard for that because we tried for college, they had the methods classes where we'd go in and learn all the strings, and I already knew that, so they gave me cello and bass, and God, I had to like, I had to just put a lot of oomph into that,
It's a big instrument, and it's real easy to get tense up on it. I was like, I started with Johnny Hamill forever, and he was really good about trying to get you to relax. Like that's what we do for an entire lesson. Sometimes is just play whole notes the entire lesson, and we just do scales, and it's all about just relaxing.
Because you're like adjusting I think that's what people don't understand about bowing, right? I mean, because you were talking about speed, right, and then the weight, and
it's a lot of things to think about. And it's sometimes starting out, you just gotta think about one thing at a time. It's like, okay, where's a good place to keep my bow to get this note to sound good?
Right.
The next thing you think about, like, you try to think about all three at once. It's like your mind gets tense because it's a lot to think about, and then when your mind's tense, your body's tense.
Yeah. That's a good piece of advice too. I mean, I do that with my students all the time. Is try to get into one thing, because now you don't think about that.
No,
right?
I don't.
Now
it's just natural.
It's just natural and adjust.
It's part of my bow arm now.
Right.
And I still work on things like that. Because I'm sure I've developed several bad habits here and there. So it's always good to reevaluate.
Oh, sure, like we all have. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I don't like that idea. I get nervous with my students, that I'm gonna be, showing them bad habits and stuff, and maybe it isn't the end of the world, even if I do a couple of weird ones, but that's really cool, man. What do you think about bowed bass solos?
Like on like jazz records or it just kind of depends on the solo and who's doing it, and most of the time I think it's really cool. I've heard some bad ones, but I've heard some really killing ones. John Clayton, I think he's got a very gorgeous arco sound. He's got this. It's a big band record. It's him. I think it's Milt Jackson on Vibes, I think. And anyway, he does this version of Emily, and he bows the melody, and he takes a arco bass solo, and it's just like this waltz ballad piece, and it's just absolutely gorgeous. Yeah. And I've heard a lot of like Paul Chambers stuff. Trying to do bebop lines with the bow, and and it's cool. It's cool. I have not tried that. At least not the bebop stuff.
Right.
I've done bowed bass solos with like ballads and things like that, but I haven't done
You'd probably be good at it because I guess that you're pretty decent. I've never heard you play upright with a bow,
Well,
but you've done it for a while.
The thing that I like, Paul Chambers, when he does it, he just slurs everything.
Right. Yeah.
He's just slurring everything. And I don't know if that's the approach I'd want to take, or if I'd want to try to like come up with some bowings that would make it a little more articulate. I don't know, but that might be something I'd try experimenting with.
I slur a lot. I try on purpose, to make it, because I like really smooth playing. I don't like choppy stuff. So the reason why I was asking about the bass solo thing is because I know a lot of guys possibly don't come from classic, it's some jazz guys have always just been into jazz stuff, and they're like, okay, now I need to learn the bow. And then when they do it, I have a feeling that they pull out too far. That's one of my criticisms, is that they're because that's what I was asking at the Frog, because you're when you get down there, you can get that real core grabby, thing.
That's where the weight of your hand's going to be the easiest to manipulate. That's where you have the most control of that. One thing I can say about the bowing with the bass is like you have to use every single inch of that bow. Like from the very part where that hair is on the frog to the very tip. Especially if you're playing like whole notes. And it's kind of about the hard part with playing whole notes is like if you got like tied whole notes over bars and stuff, is transitioning, you know, because you're not going to be able to do a whole down bow for 2 bars of, you know,
big 8 counts.
Yeah, you're not going to be able to do that. And so being able to transition without it sounding like a hiccup in the sound, then that's really difficult. And one thing that you know, Francois Raboth talks about is like it's in, you're feeling it in your body. You know, you're not moving your arm and doing it. It's like that transition's starting here in your core. You know, and you're
that's
hearing
interesting.
It,
yeah.
You know?
I wondered if because it's hard to see this, but instead of you see like back, you know, back and forth. The ends are sort of like, I think this is what you're sort of kind of getting at, is the end is sort of like oval rounded. Do you know what I mean?
Like a circular
but
shape.
you can't do that, right? It's not a thing, right? Because your bow still is. But you kind of.
It's like if you put an LED light on the tip of your bow and turn out the lights. The shape would be kind of like an oval versus just a straight line. Right.
Yeah. A very, very jagged. It's definitely an oval as opposed to a square. That's really interesting. So he's saying that you kind of use your body to move. That's really interesting.
He talks about how it starts from your feet and goes all the way through your body, and you're basically making the bass and the bow an extension of yourself.
That's too zen for me.
Yeah, it's pretty deep stuff.
That's fine. That's cool, man. So you know, probably getting close to wrapping up here. Is there any like for this show is for 20-ish year olds that are kind of getting into the music business? Do you have one big major piece of advice that maybe we haven't talked about, or one piece of advice for any giggers getting in?
For anybody like trying to get into a gig, and just go out and meet people. Like go support the scene. Go out to every single live show you can. Talk to people and go to the jam sessions. You know, like get yourself out there. Let people know you're there. You know, you can try doing that stuff through Facebook, but I just don't think that works as well as actually just showing up to a show. Especially like here in Kansas City, it's a music community, you know, and to be a part of that community, you have to be going to the shows. You have to be going, showing your face there and supporting, you know, the other musicians. You know, that's how you meet people. That's how you get your name out there.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably the best advice I could give anybody is just go watch live music somewhere, you know, some local music, you know.
Go talk to the guys too.
Go talk to them. Yeah, everybody's super friendly here. And
they are super friendly here.
Yeah, I mean, you can just say, hey man, it sounded great. You know, whatever. You know, if you're a little more gutsy and you want to talk about other stuff too, go for it. But some people just go out, say hi. Some people will shy.
Yeah, it's a good piece of advice. I mean, you can't get a gig if nobody knows you.
Yeah, you're not gonna get called ever. The other thing, you know, maybe have some business cards or something, so when you do go out, you can hand them out.
Sure. Yeah.
That's something.
Be prepared a little bit.
Yeah.
That's cool, man. So definitely I've you know, kind of, again, you know, publicly, you know, thank you guys for letting me come, you know, jam a couple of tunes with you, and then Brian's gig too have come up to his gigs. He lets me come and sit in a little bit, and I definitely appreciate it. But it's really fun to meet guys like yourself, because we're kind of, you know, pretty, you know, on the same wavelength music-wise, I would say.
Genres,
and and so that's really cool to meet some of you guys. Definitely Caleb's been a good, you know, good buddy, you know, just to know. And your guys' whole crew, you got that Satori Ruskin crew, you know, has been really nice to me anyways. So I definitely appreciate it from my end. And but yeah, that's cool, man. So I don't know what else to say really. So unless you got anything else.
No, I think that's all I had.
Sweet, man. Well, this is Jacob Roemer playing around town, come check them out with Satori and Brian Ruskin Quartet. And there you go, dude.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks for coming, man.
I appreciate you, Rob.
We'll be back next time with some more interviews. So see you guys later.